And welcome back.
Welcome back. As mentioned before we went to our first commercial break, we are joined by three esteemed women, Marlene. And we're going to be discussing the issue of women in political leadership this morning. As such, we're joined by Senior Counsel Garcia. Good morning. Former Belize City Mayor Zenaida Moya. Good morning. And candidate for the Collet division, Carolyn Sandiford. Good morning.
Let's put that in perspective. During a period
of time. I got you.
Of course.
I got you. Good morning again, ladies, and thanks for joining us this morning.
To be here.
Yes, all right.
It's a pleasure.
Well, we appreciate you coming in for this conversation. It's one I think that we have every year. But it's interesting to be able to hear the shift in perspectives and sometimes continuing to hear the same message, which realizes that the change isn't taking place the way we'd like it to. But before I do, I just want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your own personal experiences in political leadership. So let's start on this end.
Well, good morning again, everybody. I must say that going into politics, I definitely had a perspective that is different now. As a mother, going into politics, I was single, didn't have any children and all that. And I have to bring up that issue because a lot of us women, we are mothers. And back then, you know, I had different perspective. I could go where I want. You know, I had a different perspective on what a single mother needed, what a mother needed, what a single parent needed, what a child needed. When I came out, now, I can totally, so the pro was being able to go all over the place. So they want you to speak here, they want you to represent here, you need to go there, you need to go there. Yes, and that's fine, and yes, you do have the intelligence that perhaps you can speak on that particular matter, whatever they ask you. And yes, you may be very competent in particular areas, but politics, when you go into it, it's to represent people and it's to understand their needs. And I believe that when I became a mother, I really started to understand more of our citizens' needs, because a lot of our citizens, they have families. And so I wasn't a free bird anymore. I understood then that a woman, and clearly a politician, a woman politician, that person now has a family to take care of. So that child may or may not be taken care of depending on how you balance your career, your political career. And so you have to ensure that you have a family that is there to support you. And if you don't have that family to support you, you have to ensure you can pay for someone to take care of that child. Otherwise, you may be left behind, and that's where the boys club come in, because you may never get to even talk within that boys club if you have to be at home or away taking care of that child. So that's one thing. It's a good thing, because then you now start to understand that, you know what, daycare is extremely important. A man in a child's life now is extremely important. Before I got into politics, I was like, oh, I can do it all. You know, you don't need a man, a single parent, oh, you can do it all. No. I understand that that child needs both parents. Two perspectives, they're both important. So again, that has changed. Appreciating your fellow women, political, sometimes aspirants, colleagues, whatever, you understand, you know, that they're trying to achieve. And oftentimes, I'll be frank with you, you support each other, regardless of what political affiliation you may have. And I must say, I've been on trips with yourself together. We're quite far. And I've learned to respect each and every one of you. And of course, you start to respect what persons have done, such as Honorable Dolores Balderamous.
Just very quickly before we move into the second introduction, how different was what you thought being a politician as a female was going to be versus the reality?
Well, I thought that as a female, you know, you would be accepted warmly. The red carpet probably would have been rolled out to you. And you would have been appreciated as a person, as a woman that you are, that you bring strength You know, you bring a level of another level of experience, another perspective.
Yeah.
But what I found out is that, unfortunately, a lot of our male colleagues do not appreciate that. I think and that's where the old boys club come in, because they already have things set. You know, they have their things set, and you come in with a different perspective. That's too much for them, and that's when problems come in.
Right. Well, you know, I think I would begin by saying that support systems are extremely important. And I believe I was very fortunate because parents, husband, and family always gave me that support that I really could have sallied forth and gotten right down onto the ground. And you know, in reflecting now, I was thinking the other day, sometimes I walk down the street and everybody know me. And I wondered, well, I mean, apart from being the jazz lady, no, but I started reflecting. And when I represented the Port Loyola constituency, it was the largest constituency in Belize City and one of the largest in the country. And then Belize Rural Central has at least 7,500 to 8,000 voters. So combined, if you put it together, I have represented close to 14,000 people. And the thing about it is that I believe I knew just about everybody. And I don't think that there is any substitute for just getting out there, putting on your tennis shoe, and getting to know people. And if I could do it all over again, I would, but I have to put this little rider. And I'm hearing it coming from Lady Zenaida. I have to put this little rider. It is not easy. And it is much more difficult for women. And I want to say this, that at the convention level was more difficult than at the national level, because we had some very unfortunate experiences. I remember one of my campaigners, somebody put sugar in his gas tank. And I remember when I went out to Garcia Rock one time, I was the interloper. The party didn't want me at the time. And so when I got home, I found that my two headlights were smashed. So it isn't easy. It's very, very rough. It's very rough and tumble. But I don't believe that I would want to give a message of reticence this morning. I would want, although sometimes you think it's thankless, I would want to give a message of, let's pull up our socks, let's get out there, and let's do it. There are still too few women in politics. And I want to pause also to give big respect to Miss Beverly. Well, we used to say Castillo. It's Williams now. And I wish her all the best. And I feel that even though it isn't nice to lose, I was happy that Belize Rural Central got a woman representative in the National Assembly, and that's how I would put it in a little shot at the first, you know.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I want to start by saying that I draw much inspiration and guidance from these two women who sit beside me. My entry into politics was invited into politics, and I learned very early that there was an initial perspective of romance. It was going to be romantic. We're going to walk the streets and have the lovely conversations and so on and so forth, not recognizing that there's an art and a science to it. And so my first experience was that nobody is going to teach you the art and science. You are going to have to learn it yourself. I did not get that kind of support with the art and science, but I had the romance, which I still do. And with romance, you know, there's highs and there's low. So for me, that was my first lesson, that at the end of the day, you have to understand that you're in there to win and that it is not just about romance. And my second lesson then would be that what is it that you need to bring to the table for you to earn a place at the table? Oftentimes, women are looked at simply as, oh, they're going to talk about the soft issues. My background was not a soft issue background. I came out of engineering, planning, and law. And so when I get around the table, my interest was not solely regarding that of being a mother or also being a sister or so on and so forth. My perspective was also about development issues, which, yes, is anchored in what the perspective of women. But to my mind, it was more about families and communities and how we look at physical, social, economic components. That was far from the table. That discussion was not there at all. And so that was, and then another lesson learned. How do you earn that? And I spent 2 years as a chairman of the party, and so it was understanding how you navigate. And there was one thing, I set certain goals, and I say, okay, I will navigate and get to these goals, which I did. I was able to, for example, one thing, get into the constitution of the party, and Honorable Dolores will know about this, that we must have a minimum of 1/3 women in the leadership position of the party. Now, we haven't calibrated the roadmap, but it's there. And so that was one thing, one achievement. So a lesson learned then is that you must set the goals that you want to achieve and earn yourself, because it's not, as I think Zenaida quite rightly said, it's not going to be given to you. And even if it's given to, if it's put to you, it is more in, and I will use the Honorable Dolores word, auxiliary. And so that was my second lesson. The third lesson that I learned was that you have to, and going to the science, if you want to win, you have to understand politics. It's a game. It is not solely romance. And so it was trying to understand that, so that when I do go back, that I understand it a little bit better. My experiences within the party or within the ground was also led me to conclude that yes, there have been many reasons put out as to why more women were not in politics. We've heard the political barriers, the socioeconomic barriers, the ideological barriers, but there was also something else that nobody was talking about, the great stories. And it was being on the ground and having these conversations with women that you begin to understand the role of women in making the kind of changes within our society that nobody was documenting, nobody was talking about. And that in itself was an enlightening experience for me, so that I could have drawn on the strength of people like Madame Liz, Miss Jane, and so on and so forth. But I had to do that on my own, you know, so I think that in itself also, my lesson was then, and I think Zenaida brought it up, and that we have to learn to share our experience, learn from each other, so that the younger woman can see the role models and then perhaps aspire to have the great conversations that are going to change the development landscape of Belize.
Let me ask a quick question here. When you look at the political history of a young nation like Belize, post-independence, you find that there continues to be a disparity when it comes to men in leadership positions politically and women. My humble observation has always been, when you look at some of the candidates around election time, you find that they're often supported strongly by female campaigners, but you don't necessarily see the number of women actually offering themselves for electoral and, of course, political leadership, as we should, considering the fact that development requires having that gender parity, so to speak. Can you ladies speak on that?
In my case, you're quite right. Huge number of women who were walking the streets with me. We did have some males. It's just tradition. The women, for whatever reason, I believe they are extremely interested in politics. They are willing to walk. It doesn't matter how fast they can walk, they will be next to you. And if they like you, they really, genuinely, I believe, want to support you. I've had women who they will, I don't want to say this word, but they would beat up somebody for me.
They're so defensive and protective.
That's how they are protective, and they really, really, really try to do their best to support me. I always feel though that men have been supportive. The first time I went into politics, I had certain men who said, you know what, we're not used, we've never had a woman be mayor, I don't know how it will be, but you know, they will do the support, but they also look at your competence, you understand? So some of the women that are walking with us, perhaps they you know, they're doing it and they're gathering the experience, and they may one day walk as a candidate. But for now, we walked as we had done certain things. I'm not saying myself I had done politics before, but I was a head of department in the government service among a trade union leader and so forth. So that helped to propel me along, that these number of women were, I believe they felt very proud to be able to be alongside of me. I got called different names, which were, for some people, they would say, you know, it's not like Shatta, ghetto queen, but it was in a good light because they felt I could relate with them. So it's a good and it's a bad, but hey, always be happy those women are with you.
And I think what you are pointing out and following up on what Isani asked is that we see that women know how to lead, but we see the landscape where women seem more comfortable being the behind the scene leader rather than the person in the forefront. And I've always observed, and I can't say all, but most of the women who offer themselves as candidates, put their name on the ballot, have had some leadership experience or are very qualified for the positions that they're going up for. We don't see the same with the male. They have more the personality and the determination, and they go for it. I want to ask, what made you move, because I'm very sure you all had leadership positions as well before, and decide that you were comfortable enough in yourself to face whatever would happen and put your name on the ballot? Is it a personality issue? Is it a support issue? Was it a scenario where you say, why not, and I'll just rise to the occasion?
I think it's a combination of all. Because at the end of the day, you also have to have some reason, some rationale. What I've seen over the history of women in politics is that those that have been transformational leaders went into politics with a cause. There was something that they wanted to do. There were others who were invited, so they simply joined the fray. So it has to be a combination. You have but at the end of the day, you have to feel that you bring something to the table. Whether you bring something to the table to support someone, or whether you bring something to the table in terms of something that you want to achieve. But again, I always look at politics, and I think the Honorable Dolores mentioned this in a meeting that we had the other day, that it is not only about women represented, it's also about women wanting to change a system that is fundamentally flawed. When you have a country that is marred in poverty and high crime and violence and corruption and all of these kinds of things, women want to enter the politics to change. And that in itself becomes a challenge, especially if it's institutionalized. And so when I think those, like I said, who have been very successful in terms of achieving something, it's because they came in with a cause. I think there are those who have made it, but they simply feel comfortable, going back to your point. I am prepared to do this. And I think we have always found that women have different roles and they are leaders in their own right. Zenaida speaks of the women who are on the streets. They are leaders in their own right, because to be out there to campaign, to be supportive takes a lot, because people they cuss you, people they stone you, people don't want to hear where you got for that. And they're there to support you, so they're leading that charge in their own way.
Let me ask. We hear the challenges of women running for office in this country, and there is always, there are quite a number of anecdotes I think that people have as to, or assumptions I should say, that people have as to what it will be like. And I want to ask you very clearly, is this barrier that is assumed, is it a real one, or one that we have put a mental barrier that you will go on the ground and people will treat you differently because you're a woman, or people will see that you're not capable because you're a woman? Did you encounter experiences like this, or is this a mental barrier that we've somehow adopted?
Oh, well, I don't think it's an illusion at all.
I know, that's what I'm saying, because some people say, oh, well, I like women. And so tell us about the examples that you have come to realize that, You know, this isn't just something we're saying. This is the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
It is indeed. And I believe that one of the reasons for the reticence of a lot of women to step forward is that pushback from men and having to live up to people's idealized view or picture of what women should be as opposed to a particular individual. And that is why I believe that training for women and the support for women to really take that step forward is important. Because I don't think that women automatically are gender aware or automatically bring to the table well, we call it soft issues, but it isn't really soft issues. It's how do I put on a lens of seeing what is happening out there from the perspective of what we can do to really change things from that masculine approach or that macho approach. And this is why I believe that it is so important. You can't be afraid to lead. You just can't be afraid to lead. And I believe that one of the successes that we have seen from people who have gone before is that, you know, they say Madame Liz had her shotgun and she drove her Land Rover and she smoked her cigarette, and nobody may tell Madame Liz. I mean, she kind of looked a little small and frail in that picture in front of the National Assembly in the late 60s. But that's not the Madame Liz that we know about. and
Somebody needed to capture her in that Land Rover.
Somebody needed to capture her then. But I think the great inspiration was that she said to herself, women can own land.
Exactly.
Women don't necessarily have to be an appendage to the husband, and you can't get a mortgage if a man no walk into the bank with you. No, we need to get out there and we need to empower ourselves. I don't know how far we've come.
Well,
I know Zenaida and Carolyn would have views on this. I really don't know how far we've come.
Let's look at some statistics.
But let's keep fighting, precisely.
We've never had more than 2 elected women in office. We have 2
At a time.
currently at a time.
At a time.
And while there has been for a couple years now training sessions for women in politics, we still haven't made a breakthrough beyond that too. There are appointed women who are appointed in leadership positions, and some would say to help fill the gap. But it seems that from the point where the parties come together and make a decision as to who their potential candidates will be, it's from that point that there aren't enough women offering themselves there or being asked to offer themselves as well. So I wanted to say that when we look at what has changed, you pointed out 1965 was 6%. We're still at 6%.
We're still at 6%. In fact, if we even look at the mayoral situation, where I think we are now down to 11 from 14% women mayors. Again, the statistics says a lot. But I also want to point you to something else, Susani and Marlene, which is equally important. If we look at the national recognition of women who have gone before, who have laid the foundation for the modern day Belize, you don't see them nationally recognized. Let us look at our national heroes. We have 2 men who are national heroes, quite rightly deserving. You will tell me in all of this we cannot find one woman who have done extremely well in this country to be recognized as a national heroine. In fact, I have argued the case of Madame Liz to be a national heroine. I haven't won that one yet, but I will still argue it. Let us look at the Order of Belize, the 2nd highest nationally recognized honor. 2 women out of 26 or 27. Only I think it's like 7% of all the people, yet we have almost equal population in terms of women and men. So I often say to women that we need to start looking at these key issues, because if in the schools, quite rightly so, the educational curriculum is going to talk about the national heroes. So that is institutionalized that men are national heroes. I want to add this also, if I may. I met a young lady the other day who said to me, He said, Miss Carolyn, she said, how is it that when you sing the national anthem, he said, we talk about sons. What happened to the daughters? Right? She was at this function where all men were there talking about women and children issues. She said, look, I think she's like about 11 years old. She said, look, they're lone men. So if we not project that, if she said to me, I don't got no manhood. We just sing about a land of the free by the Caribbean Sea, our manhood we pledge to thy liberty. A woman has no manhood. So these are the kind of fun, they might song thing, but they're fundamental. If that child is coming up all the day, only know that our manhood to pledge, then where are the women? So there are lots of, my point then is that it is not one issue. There are lots of different issues that we need to start to look at, and perhaps then we need to start to look at what is the narrative we want to put out there.
Let me put this to you ladies. It may be hypothetical at this point, but at some point in the near future it will become a reality. You find that when you look at the way things presently are, you have more women being educated formally than there are men. But at the moment, you still have more men in leadership positions than there are women.
Unemployed.
Do you foresee this sea change where in the future, let's say a decade from now, the political landscape would have changed considerably to allow for an equal reflection of the number of educated women stepping forward to lead the country when you look at the dynamic between men and women in politics?
I believe that will only happen if proportional representation is implemented. I do not feel, as it is right now and for a long while, that men will open the doors. They make it very difficult on women. What you went through, what myself, Carolyn, maybe, I'm not sure, probably yourself as well, but it was not easy. And like what you mentioned, there were 2 women who ran in your constituency. We were able to get a woman elected because there were 2. But were there a man and a woman? Perhaps not. You know, whatever impediments, whatever problems, whatever that could have been thrown, probably more than likely would have been thrown at Honorable Dolores. So proportional representation, I believe, really needs to be looked at. We speak about it, and the United Nations, and it has been a push, CEDAW, and all these conventions, all these entities, they want more women in politics, but it won't just happen just like that. So we, as a movement, I would say a movement, and when I say movement, it does not have to be just women. Okay? Men have to be there. They have to say, you know what? I appreciate women enough to support that woman because I know what she will bring to the table, and I want to open doors for my daughter, for my sister, because double standards, they're real. They're very real. They may look at us and they will say, okay, you have to work 10 times harder than that male. And that is why when you speak about a male going into politics, he may not have much qualifications, experience, may not even understand or appreciate the persons he's looking to represent. But you know what? In a male,
or the personality,
that person could high five, all kind of thing. But a female may have all the qualification, the love for that constituency, for the people looking to change. As an economist, I studied economics simply because I wanted to help in the economic development of Belize. So I had a cause. I've had a cause from a young girl. But they won't just, people more than likely may not look at that. They look at, okay, male, female, oh, I might give them a chance. I was fortunate enough, and probably I think it was the gusto, the
time
trade union, you know, that kind of aspect. They say, okay, Zenaida, maybe no soft, because then they look at you as soft.
They got to see that side of you as a leader.
Zenaida never afraid for Kosoti leader. Can I come in? Can I come in? And big respect. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you know that name. She said, okay, there are 3 women in the U.S. Supreme Court, And they asked her, well, would you like to see 4 or 5? She said, no, I'd like to see 9. And if we need to wrap our heads around the fact that if there can be 9 women in the U.S. Supreme Court, why can't there be many more women in the House of Representatives and the Senate? In other words, we have 50-50, but so what if there are more women representing the country than men? Because
for so long there's been more men.
We don't have any problem when it was
gone
all men.
along a trajectory
And
that
so
we
let's
want.
wrap our heads around that as we go into the next half of Women's Month. But I also want to say this. We talked about proportional representation. I would like to talk about affirmative action and quotas. Because if you do not have affirmative action and quotas, we might go another 10, 20 years and 10 or 10%.
Yes.
You see? And let us think about the theme. And big respect to the Special Envoy, her office, big respect to the Women's Department, the people who are carrying on that push, that thrust, the political parties. If we want to have planet 50-50 by 2030, then not only do we have to wrap our heads around Ruth Bader Ginsburg's assertion, but we have to make it more real in Belize so that we can have more people coming forward and with that support.
How
Precisely.
progressive? How progressive have we been in that regard, though? I mean,
We haven't.
we have. It seems as though we're stagnant and we're dormant on the issue.
And that's why you must set goals. As
Yes.
a nation, we
Yes.
don't do that.
Yeah.
If we set that goal and say by 20, this is
Goals are set,
2016.
they're just not met.
No, not there has been no.
And we have agreed on
conventions,
conventions.
yeah.
Right.
Yes,
but
but
we
I
haven't
am
put
talking
anything in place to really
I am talking about
materialize it.
Belize setting its goals.
Yeah.
If Belize don't set its national development goals that speak specifically, we have signed a multitude of conventions from the nuclear and all kinds of things that we don't participate in. And I agree with you that we signed the CEDAR and so on and so forth. But if we set a goal that say by 2030 there will be parity, then today where are we? We have 2. What is it we need to achieve by, and as Dolores and you even said, then what are the strategies that we need to engage? Those strategies may be the proportional representation. It may be quota. It may be telling the stories. It may be changing the educational curriculum. It may be changing our national anthem.
Changing the political constitution. Like
Maybe
what you all did.
constitution.
Yes.
We did it within our political
Yes.
party. Now that may need to be reflected in the constitution of Belize.
Yes.
And those are the kind of specific things that we need to do. And I'm hopeful that our party, having done that, is going to do that come the next as a part of its general manifesto.
You know, it's interesting because I think one of the debates that also takes place is that it shouldn't have to be put within the Constitution for you to be able to have equal representation. And one statistic, and I tell you, you both said it, but I find myself having to remind people of very often, is that we are a 50-50 society.
Exactly.
Uniquely so. There's still people who believe that it's not 50-50. Maybe we don't say it enough. The population is currently 50% women, 50% men.
51% women and 49% men.
You're right. That was the two girl babies born this month. So. And growing. But it is important. So if the half of the population is not being adequately represented, we should, by faith,
That's right.
be working towards it, but we're not. Now, I want to ask one of the questions. I don't think it is my favorite part of when we have this conversation, but it is a very real scenario. And it is the issue of women supporting women. We have found for a very long time, and I know it is the same in most sectors that you work in, that sometimes the hardest challenge or the biggest barrier you have to overcome is the way that women view women in leadership. And it gives so much credit to the men who think that women can't lead. But let me hear your perspective or your experience on this issue.
I would say that women do support women. I think sometimes women are scared for other women because they are aware of all the challenges that you face out there.
Yeah.
And it's regardless of what level of leadership or what role you take on. And I think sometimes we are being unfair to women as well because men don't support men either. So you will have cases where men don't support men and you'll have cases where women don't support. For whatever reason, that is the reality of the world. But my experience has been internally within the People's United Party. There is a massive support from women within the party while I was there. And from men also, let me
Yeah.
In fact, you ladies have a United Women's Group.
Exactly. So we do have a great coalition and support team within our party. Out in the professional world, I have had to relate because of the nature of my work with many men. And I have had their support and I've had the support of women. And my reality is always this. If you set your goals in life, then there will be those individuals and that you will have to work with and partner with, because moving ahead in anything, whether it's politics, profession, you have to partner, you have to network, you have to work with people who can get you there.
Yeah.
And once you set your goals, there will be the naysayers, but you have to find a way to move around the naysayers. That's how I look at it.
I would say that as someone who has been elected into office, I have found that whilst the women outside will support you heavily, sometimes the women alongside you who have been elected are sometimes used by men, and sometimes through their own they're not mature enough, they have not gathered the experience to understand that, you know what, you're being used. A male will always want to keep the status quo. Try not to be used. Try to support that woman, because you know that if you do not support that woman, your fellow colleague who has been elected alongside you, things will continue. There will be no change for the better. So I have found that some of these women have been used. The other, if we were to do it again, I think some of these women would not have allowed themselves to be used because they have matured and they have understood.
Seen the picture.
Yes, they have seen the picture and they have seen the difficulties, and they themselves may now be in that position. So yes, there have been that, but sometimes it's within. And there's also the aspect that some women who may not have really walked the walk, walk the talk, however, they may have just been pulled in from wherever, and whilst the women have been on the ground championing causes and so forth, they may just be placed there, and it's those same women who are just sometimes appointed, I'm not saying anybody in particular, appointed, they're the ones who again are being used to really ensure that the elected individuals do not get the necessary support from females, and then it will look as though, oh, females don't support you. No, man, the majority of the female on the ground, they are die-hard supporting you.
Yeah. Now, my final point is being able to effect change once elected, and I want to bring that to you as a former area representative and minister. We know that one of the things that you are still credited for is your work in the Families and Children Act, and being able, specifically one I think that people use is the establishment of the rights of persons who are in common law unions. Now, being elected and being given a portfolio is one thing, but being able to effect change usually takes a lot of lobbying. We know this. Talk about being able to bring these types of changes into fruition, and whether it is a culture that has to be established within your own party itself, or it was an effort to be able to show that this issue was of importance and not just a woman or family issue.
Right. Well, I think you have to have, like George Price said, sometimes you have to be like a mule with blinders.
Tunnel vision.
Yes. You see the problems in front of you, and you have to get in there and do something. I really wish that we could do more now, but really, it has to come from within.
Yeah.
It does have to come from within. And last week we were looking at the domestic violence legislation. And really, when you think about it, there should have been a major cocktail party or something, or maybe some barbecue or something, because it was the 25th anniversary of the passage of the first domestic violence legislation. That is a milestone. Yes, it's been upgraded and improved, but from my view, it would never be sitting on any laurel or thinking, well, everything is done. Sure, there's a lot of work still to do out there. The role that we all can play, whether we're sitting in the House or not, is to keep that lobbying effort up. But I think Isani is completely right. We have to change the culture so that more women are stepping forward, but we have to create and sustain the enabling environment to have more women come forward. And to me, that is the way to effect change.
We need more flexible hours.
Precisely.
For women. That's a big
deal. It's a big deal. The things that affect us may not affect somebody else, And certainly, not being afraid to lead, knowing what you want to accomplish, and encouraging others to step forward as well. Those would be the messages, I think,
I like what you're doing, and as a close, we could have the rest of you share as well. What would you say to the young women out there who do have aspirations to become a leader, to take the final step?
I would say you're needed. There may have been challenges for all of us here. Some of us have been trailblazers in our own right. We have gone through tremendous challenges. However, we're still here. We're still strong. We still have a smile on our face, and we're proud of our accomplishments. All right? You must understand that you're needed. So young women have to understand that they're needed. There's more things that needs to be fought for. Flexible working hours. When a woman, and I think this is a real issue. I think when a young woman or a woman has a child, that person has to be allowed to care for her child. And the men now have to understand that, she may do a lot more, a whole lot more, if she is given the flexible working hours. All right? It's a win-win situation, because do you want a broad-based tax system, or do you want just to always be taxing one little sector? Okay, we want a broad base, right? Okay, so to ensure that, you have to ensure that allow more women to be able to make it and be successful in the working arena. So young women, you have a role to play. There's a lot more I can speak of in terms of challenges and issues and causes, but get in there, be strong, and know that you belong there.
Right. Excellent.
My simple advice is always set your goals. Know where you want to go, and then you start identifying the individuals and the organizations that can help you to get there. Set a cause that you want to fight for. And as Dolores said, put on the blinders, because sometimes that is what you have to do. And along the way, be flexible enough to know that sometimes you may have to navigate very challenging waters, but keep the blinders on and know exactly what you want to achieve. All our successful leaders, all our transformational women who have impacted greatly on this nation. You made that mention of that common law. Do you know that 25% of the population of Belize live in common law? So that one single legislation that Dolores fought for impacted on 25% of the population of Belize. So when you do that, you will find at the end of the day, you'll feel professionally and personally accomplished.
And only to add, I think that my feeling is that the next big frontier is real economic empowerment. They said today is not a lovely day, We're going to have a hard times budget coming up, but never mind that. I think that we have to remain confident. We have to remain optimistic. And I think that if more women are at the table, we will be able to fight to bring everybody up, man, woman, and child, because we have to create a better Belize. And I think the way is with more women participating and fighting for the economic empowerment that we all need.
Well, thank you,
Well
ladies.
said. Well said.
The time just zoomed on by because it's such an interesting conversation. But we did want to get in this discussion, especially in the context of Women's Month, and we appreciate you coming in and sharing your stories.
Thank you
No
very
doubt.
much.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to the newly elected president of the Christian Workers Union, Dale Truheke. So stay tuned.